Hello, everyone. My name is Lewis Harris, and welcome to Record in Progress, the podcast that I created after being one of those who was relatively surprised at the election results of the 2024 presidential election, where I also made the realization that I probably could have done more to ensure the election went the way I was hoping it would go. And so I created this podcast as a hopefully a beacon or a platform for people over the next 4 years and hopefully beyond to hear and share different perspectives, stories, and narratives to create understanding and a pathway towards a unified society. So I am privileged to have my next guest, who is somebody I very much respect, is actually met as a constituent here when I was running for office, and somebody who has shown up, I would say, has shown up very regularly for the community. So could you share with the audience your name?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for taking this on, Lewis. I really appreciate it. I am Ilona. I too hail from the beautiful little town of Mukilteo.
Yeah, here in Washington State. So, Ilona, how do you identify yourself?
I identify as a middle aged to older, white, straight woman who embraces all diversity.
And what do you do?
I am recently retired due to a layoff, and I had the luxury of being able to make that decision to not try to re enter the workforce. So I joined my husband, who is also retired. And I am now choosing to get more involved in our local government, as you have come to realize. And I, with some support from you and others, I was named to our local Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Commission. So I now consider myself proud DEI commissioner here in the city of Mukilteo. And my husband and I do a lot of great traveling.
Excellent. What industry were you in?
I was in IT,
Okay.
information technology, and my last 5 years, I was specifically in cybersecurity, where I was in management.
I see. Okay, excellent. And so and part of these initial questions are really to help folks connect with you and just understand not all the facets of who you are, but some, right? And so this next question is, what is a credential that you use or have used most often to sell yourself on job applications?
Yeah, I've been very fortunate in my company that I didn't have to apply for many jobs. So I didn't have to do that application or resume process. But one of the things in LinkedIn or when I applied for the DEI commission, or if I did move from department to department, one of the greatest assets that I always called out is that I'm a great people leader and an awesome collaborator. And much like what you try to do is looking at all sides. I really appreciate that we all have our own experience, our own path that we have walked. And that's what I believe is one of my biggest strengths. So, technical skills can always be learned, processes can be learned, but this is something that I believe is a soft skill that you either have it or you don't. So, that's what I would always call out in my applications or resumes.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you for that. So let's get into the meat of the questions. How did you vote in the 2024 presidential election?
So, I am a proud Democrat and I did vote for Kamala Harris.
Okay.
And I would have to say, much like the first time Trump won, I was not surprised. I saw it coming and I was shocked. Yes. And it broke my heart, but I
Sure.
saw it coming.
I'm curious, what were the signs for you?
The signs for me, and even though we are a very blue state
Yeah.
and even a blue city, my neighbors right here around me are Republicans, and they're more than my neighbors, they're my friends. And so we had very enlightened and vibrant conversations, and some of them are local business owners. And for them, it was about the economy and it was about immigration.
Right.
And Trump really resonated with them. And I could not see them coming over to my side or even understanding what the Democrats as a party were saying. So I knew that if in a blue state I couldn't convince my own neighbors and friends
Yeah.
to hear me louder, as a nation, it wasn't going to bode well for us.
Yeah, I'm glad you had your eyes open enough to see that it could actually happen. I think a lot of people had their expectations or thoughts about the election, and that's really what we're trying to illuminate in the podcast is just where do people land? What were they thinking? What are the reactions? And really, the space is not meant to be judgmental on any of the guests or even me as a podcast host, but it's really just to help create some understanding. So the next question I have for you, Ilona, is what are three feelings you have about the results of the 2024 presidential election? Yeah.
I was defeated. I felt defeated. I felt angry. And at the same time, I was amazed that the red wave was so big.
Right.
I did not believe that so many people were so disenchanted with the Democratic message. I really thought that some of those swing states that we'd pull at least 40, 50% of them. That did surprise me. The red wave just took over. That truly amazed me. So I keep telling myself 4 more years. But as I listen to his cabinet appointees, I'm thinking, oh, good gosh, what are we in for? This is a rockier ride than the first time.
Right, right. And yeah, there's really no if, ands, or buts. The Republicans have control of the government. It's interesting because I know there's this shared understanding in politics that there's a pendulum, right? It goes one way, then it swings back the other way, right? And while I do believe that's true, just as a kind of a universal law, or if you will, the there's always been those checks and balances between the three branches of government, right? Even throughout his presidency and Obama's presidency and Biden's presidency, there was always a check where the other side at least had some control. That is not the case now. And I don't think we really know what that looks. I don't know what that looks like because I'm
Right.
only 37 this year. I've not ever seen anything like what has been happening, and it feels a little baffling. So
That's where I have to hope in my heart before I do become too scared. And I don't want to
yeah,
say depressed, but scared that we as a nation and we as a government, a democratic government, will rise up and
mhm,
put in those checks and balances. I know he has grandiose ideas, and some of them I can even get behind.
sure, sure,
I'm not ever going to always vote my party if there
sure,
is something that is totally out of line with what I believe in. But I have to tell myself that I have to trust in the people that will surround him.
right. Kind of like last time,
Kind of like last time. I'm
right?
hoping that his current appointees, one, that they either will not get confirmed, or two, if they do, that they will be very short lived. Like they,
That's right. He did have a high turnover rate.
yes, it was kind of
Yeah.
a revolving door.
Yeah, that's a great point because he's always been very comfortable firing people when they're not in line, right? And so while I do agree that's probably going to do that again, question is who replaces them? Will they be better or worse, right? And that's
Right.
where it's like we just don't freaking know. We just don't know.
No, no.
Hard to speculate. Okay. So next question is, what do you fear most about the next Trump presidency?
That he will have success in the rollbacks on the advances that we've made in rights for women, rights for the LGBTQ community, drill, baby, drill,
Right.
the obvious disregard for the environment, and in recent days, like I said, the list of his potential cabinet nominees. Those are the things that I fear most right now in his presidency. There are many other things, but those are the big ones.
Yeah, I agree. So the next question is what do you hope most about the Trump presidency?
Well, he keeps saying that he has fixes for the economy. And although I personally have not been negatively impacted by the economy in the last 4 years, if he can truly improve the financial lives of those that truly live paycheck to paycheck,
Yeah.
I'm all on board.
Right.
Uh,
Same here.
do that. If he would consider the immigration bill that was put before him
Right.
or before the
That he killed,
that he
basically.
killed,
Right.
hey, it's a path forward.
Right.
I am an immigrant. I just became a citizen in 2012. So
Okay.
immigration is something that is near and dear to my heart as well. We have to have some control at the borders because our resources need to be utilized well for our own citizens, and
Yeah.
we need to let immigrants come in. I always have this, if only I had a magic wand. If I were so rich and I could pay every migrant worker here illegally
Right.
that works in our factories, maybe not factories, but in our small businesses, that works in our fields,
Yeah.
that works in our restaurants, and I would say, I'm going to pay you for 3 months to stay
Mhm.
home and do nothing, this nation would so feel the repercussions
Right.
of those people not being within our system and helping support our nation.
Yeah.
Americans do not understand how much we depend on those wonderful folks who help create this great country. And these are jobs that Americans will not and do not want
Right.
unless we pay 25, 28, $29 an hour, and our economy cannot sustain that.
Thank you for sharing your personal journey towards citizenship. But that's an excellent point, right? Just imagining if he is able to deport hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions of people, rapidly, like he wants to, what that will do to the economy, not only here, but also wherever he's sending them back to, right? Because I mean, you can't just have that much displacement and not expect it to have massive repercussions. So that's actually a really good point that it'll be interesting to see how they work that because I mean, my hope is that there are people around him that will say, "Hey, we can't do it this way. We have to do it maybe this way," right? And it might prolong it, but that's maybe a hope and not a reality, you know?
Yeah, and I always look at it too, the human factor.
Yeah.
They're humans.
Mhm.
He keeps talking about the rapists, the murderers coming in. We have
Sure.
rapists and murderers in every pocket of
Absolutely.
society.
That's right.
In the affluent white societies, in the Black communities, the Latino communities, there is nobody has a,
Right. Clean
like,
slate.
exactly. And nobody has a, only I own that being a murderer, right? That's everywhere.
That's right.
So don't pin it on one pocket of the population.
Say that.
Yes, some get in. I don't doubt that. But let's not stereotype everybody.
So I have to ask you this because you are a naturalized citizen, which I believe in the promise of this country. And so, of course, people are going to want to come here. But they are talking about revoking naturalized citizenship. You know what
Yep.
I mean?
Yep.
And so, like, have you reconciled that consideration? How are you feeling about that?
Again, to keep my own sanity, I just cannot
Yeah.
believe that he'll get that far. So,
I want to dispel any perceived shame because I'm a firm believer of the greatness of this country, which affords people who have naturalized given to the economy that benefit. People should not fear what this country allows them, right? The questions I think of our time is one, are they sustainable? And two, what are the repercussions if they go away? You know what I mean? And what does that do to people? Those are the questions that I am up against because I used to be on Social Security income as well. I was in a car accident in 2006,
mhm.
fractured my spinal cord, could not walk, had to learn how to walk again. But I was paralyzed and could not do the same level of work I was doing before. And so had to go on Social Security to live. And I lived on Social Security and food stamps, mind you, all throughout college. I would not have gotten an education and made the impact in the community that I did without those benefits. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And so it's one of those things where it's like, and I've worked for an agency that gives food assistance as a way to come full circle with the experience that I had. And I've seen a lot of what people believe about that system being incorrect. And I have seen validation of some of the concerns people have. And so there might be some opportunity for efficiencies in all government, which I stand by as a principle, but the sledgehammer getting rid of some of those things, that's where my big question mark about what's going to happen really exists. So the next question is what do you believe about people who voted opposite of you?
Yeah. So again, I'm the optimist. I don't necessarily wear rose colored glasses, but I am an optimist.
Mhm.
I have to believe in my heart that the majority of the people who voted opposite me are not, in fact, racist, but rather people who are not financially stable and want to be. They believe that we have many in our country who need a hand up and that so much money is spent on immigration and
Mhm.
migrants instead of our own that they cannot reconcile this type of prioritization.
Right.
I've talked to friends who voted for Trump, and I already said this, and they have their own businesses and they have concerns about the prioritization of funds. And they do believe in my immigrants coming in, but it needs to be a more controlled and processed manner.
Sure.
Something I have to believe for my own sanity, and again, so that I don't go into my state of depression, is that for the most part, these are good, hardworking people. They are not the hardcore MAGA that is a few. We in the American society, we've always stereotyped slim sliver of a population, and I'm not going to verbalize those. But right now, I think perhaps the MAGA is the core for Republicans, and I don't believe that the majority of them are. Unfortunately, what I do see is with Trump coming back into being the president from a political, the folks in the House and in Congress, they are afraid to deny him or speak out against him because
Right.
of his threats of retaliation.
Yeah.
So I think people are perhaps our politicians are quite frankly afraid to stand
Yeah.
up to him. So
Exactly.
that's scary.
It is scary. And an absolutely good point.
Okay.
The next question is, what is the worst thing about society to you?
The great divide this election cycle has brought neighbor against neighbor, family member against family member, and the
Yeah.
loss of conversations on different issues over coffee. Instead, we bring bats and guns to the fight. When did it become okay to fight instead of learn from each other? I
Mm,
see it even in our own little part of the world. I have only become really interested and really paid attention, and this is totally on me, to politics in the last 15, 20 years. Prior
okay.
to that, it's like, okay, it's President President the second, Clinton. That's all okay because the country ran well. We had our ebbs and flows, but I didn't do a whole lot to say, oh, I need to change my citizenship so I can vote. Jack
Right.
would have conversations, and Jack and I, my husband, are very aligned. And I felt comfortable where his voice was.
Sure.
And not that we've diverged since, but it started becoming more divergent in the voices. I didn't like Bush Jr., he wasn't my favorite president, but we could still have pretty civil conversations back then. You weren't
Right.
breaking up the Thanksgiving family meal that year. And that's not the case anymore. I'm reading on social media, oh, Thanksgiving is over forever and ever with my family.
Yeah.
And why? It
Yeah.
shouldn't be hatred. And the lack of rights that I'm seeing, Roe v. versus,
Roe v. Wade.
thank you.
You don't know.
I believe that was struck down. And
Right.
that's the other scary thing to me in society right now is we're not just electing a president.
That's
We're
right.
electing our Supreme Court and the future of that. Those are lifetime appointments. And boy, the red wave took care of that for us.
Yeah.
And rights for all. That scares me.
I'm there, as somebody who does identify as gay, obviously my right to marry is in jeopardy. But I'm a little different. I and I told my partner this. Marriage to me is a legal contract. I mean, there's a financial purpose behind it. The government has nothing to do with the depth of my love for another person. Has zero to do with that. And there's not a religion in the world that can validate that beyond what I feel. And I told him, I'm like, yeah, if we get to that point, we're going to basically just become business partners and you have some sort of LLC or something instead of it being a marriage thing. But I know that there are a lot of other people in the gay community that that does matter to them. And that is truly in jeopardy for them. And so we'll have to see how this plays out. We'll see how much he's able to get done. We'll see if any heroes really rise up of this out of this. We shall see.
And you bring up a good point. Who are we going to bring forward in the Democratic Party?
Yeah, I think we could have a whole podcast about Democratic strategy because I don't understand why. knowing how old Biden was, and I'm not an ageist, but I am a realist, knowing how old he was and knowing how frail he was becoming, why they weren't positioning somebody to win.
You did touch on something, if I may. His age and his staying in the race as long as he did, that was actually another bug up their patooties,
Sure.
is that Kamala didn't run a primary.
Right.
Bothered a lot of the folks that I spoke to, the
That's right.
process in which she got the nomination.
Right.
And was it enough to have lost the election? I don't think so. I don't know if it was an excuse, but that really did not sit well.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. The next question is, what do you believe is one of the reasons that Trump and the largely Republican Congress that has now clinched the House, what is the reason they were elected?
I kept hearing over and over again that the Democratic Party was out of touch with the everyday man. We're so focused on bringing out all this great star power. It's still considered an elitist party.
Say that.
And she said all the right words, Kamala Harris did, but and even some of the Democrats I spoke to did not believe that the Democratic Party as a whole is not as in tune with the everyday people. And that's where I believe we can really gain some ground if we somehow shore that up.
Yeah, and I actually want to talk on that a little bit because not only did the Democrats focus on star power, but their messaging was focused on, I want to say, aspirational values that aren't needs. I think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Self actualization. We should be good people. We are innately good people. We should treat other people with kindness and care, all this stuff. That's where the messaging was for Democrats. But the everyday person that you're talking about are down here paying $5 a gallon for gas in some places, or the egg conversation, or even housing, right?
Yep.
Those are the issues that I think really, like you mentioned, the economy, immigration by and large are part of that reason. And not only that, the self-actualization point, like some of the rhetoric I'm hearing from the Democratic side, some of the groups that I'm sure you're a part of or you're listening to is like, oh, some of those people who voted just don't understand the economy or they don't understand how things work. And it's this educational elite stance that I don't want to say we because I'm trying to avoid the damage that does, but
Mhm.
there's this elite educational stance and the everyday voters like, you can talk down to me as much as you want. I still get a vote. And it's like, yeah, the Democratic Party really needs to have a lot of work to do. They do have a lot of work to do.
I'm going to go back to one of the earlier questions. I kept telling myself women's rights to me was a big one. If all women voted for Harris, based
Right.
just on that, she would have won.
Right.
I was amazed by the number of Black and Latino voters that Trump
Right.
took to his side. If Blacks and Latinos voted for Harris, not just because she is a woman of color, but
Sure.
let's just play it the simple game, she would have won by a landslide. So, what message are those three populations hearing that swayed them? She wasn't powerful enough, or the Democratic Party wasn't powerful enough to get those three populations that would have just
Right.
blown him out of the water. And that's what I think I cannot reconcile in my mind. This should have been a slam dunk.
Yeah.
If those three things were that important, the livelihood, the state of affair, housing, economy, and women's rights, I keep thinking that Trump's message resonated more because, like you said, it came down to this is how I'm going to reduce your taxes. This is how I'm going to reduce the price of milk. This is how you don't have to pay $82 for your Thanksgiving turkey.
But those are the perspectives a lot of people have. So, yeah, exaggeration or not, that's the perspective right out
Yeah.
there. Okay. So, do you feel like you did enough to affect the election in the way you wanted to see it go?
For me, yes. And others may disagree. I researched, I voted, I had good conversations with those I regularly interact with. Now, did I go door to door knocking or did I volunteer at a phone bank? No. But that is so outside of my comfort zone that I don't think I would have been very useful or truthful in those scenarios. It's like when I attended church many years ago. I was the voice that was always one of the loudest, just like in normal life. You know me a little bit there. But even though I am very outspoken, I was never the evangelist that could go knock on the door and say, "Hey, we have this great Sunday service. Come on and join us." Right? I do that. Instead, I became the treasurer and served in that capacity. I use my gifts where I believe they will make a difference. This election has spurred me to apply at the Snohomish County Elections Office as a ballot counter assistant. I didn't apply in time for this election, but I'm hopeful that come the next election, local, that I'll be able to help there. Again, I prefer working behind the scenes. I can't be that door knocker that, hey, I'm Ilona from the Democratic Party. Have you voted? I
Right.
I know I should put myself out there perhaps in some people's opinions. I can't do it.
I'm gonna hold space for you being able to do it eventually, hopefully, because I do trust and believe in your approach to things and your leadership. But I hear what you're saying. And the point there is that question is really the reflection question. And so I'm glad that you believe that you did the most you do. Because if we all do the little individual acts in our own spaces or in our own spheres of influence, if we're together, we can move the mountain. So thank you for what you did do. I do not believe I did enough. So I'm reconciling that by going headfirst into this podcast. So
I would challenge you to maybe not go so hard on yourself.
thank you.
I think you did quite a bit just from the conversations you and I have had, what I've seen on your social media. So I think you are grading yourself way too harshly.
Well, thank
And
you.
I hope you keep that in the podcast.
Ugh, I will. I will. Thank you. I'm a little emotional. But, anyways, okay. So, the last question I have for you is what do you want to say to the version of yourself 4 years down the road?
We did it. This is a democracy and administrations come and go. We are a resilient nation and our checks and balances held. There will be more administrations throughout my life with whom I will not agree, and I have to walk just a bit in the other people's shoes. They are just now coming out of a hard 4 years, in their opinion. In the 4 years, I hope to be more involved in my local town's government, which will have educated me even more within the next 4 years. I really hope Kamala Harris's statement of "we are more alike than we are different"
Right.
helps bring us together and truly allows for the beginning of healing.
Beautiful words. Yeah, thank you for that. And hopefully that's exactly what you will say to yourself in 4 years. You
I'm going to
shall
keep this.
see. You know what I mean? We shall all see. So, cool. Well, thank you, Ilona. I really appreciate you again because I know you here in the community and we're going to see what happens over the next 4 years and we're all going to do what we can to make sure that after the 4 years, we still have a country and still have each other. Right. So thank you. So in conclusion, like Ilona said, we are all different, but we are also all the same. And what matters is we recognize that and move forward to make a better world for all of us.
Thank you.